Let's talk about money, honey. What's up, you guys? Today, I am bearing it all. We need to have more women having candid conversations about money. So that's exactly what we're doing. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Sanjana. I'm a product manager in Silicon Valley, and I recently graduated from the Wharton Business School with my MBA. I now live in San Francisco, California. I earned my undergraduate degree at MIT, and I'm 26 years old. Over the course of my early career, I've worked on Wall Street and Silicon Valley in a range of roles, from finance to startups to product. So let's talk numbers. I'm currently a product manager at a high growth startup. My base salary is $175,000, and I'm eligible for an end of year performance bonus of $30,000. This is outside of my equity grant with my current employer, which is $125,000 in equity vesting per year over a 4-year period with a standard 1-year cliff. And if you're navigating offers or recruiting right now, look at websites like levels.fyi, talk to recent graduates in the industry and role across companies, because even the same role can differ company to company. And remember, the first offer is just a starting point.
And here's a disclaimer that I invested in a knowledgeable, reliable accountant to help me navigate my finances, especially around contracting, taxes, and setting up my LLC. The decisions I made work for my specific situation, but they may not be right for everyone. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor or tax professional before making decisions based on anything I share here.
So before I get into how I landed this job and structured my comp, I just wanted to share, I worked with a great tax professional throughout this process. This setup worked for me given my background, career stage, and access to resources. But everyone's situation is unique. So I highly recommend anyone watching to consult with a professional before making similar decisions. So first off, I got this role through someone I worked for before business school, which just goes to show your network really does matter. The relationships you build in your early career, especially the ones rooted in trust and execution, often come back around in powerful ways. The second thing I did was I actually started out as a contractor. During business school, I set up my own LLC, and I actually joined the team in a part-time capacity. This gave me the flexibility to write off a broader range of business expenses through the LLC. Everything from continuing education to content creation and professional development. My employer also offered me a $10,000 relocation bonus, and I negotiated it for it to be delivered during my time as a contractor. And when it came time to transition into full-time, I was intentional about timing. I wanted to start working full-time in May, shortly after graduation, because bills don't pay themselves, but because I had health coverage through the University of Pennsylvania until July 31st, I extended my contractor status through the end of that month. This setup gave me the tax flexibility I valued before getting converted to a W-2 employee come August 1st. Another important detail I negotiated was around my equity vesting schedule. I specifically asked for my equity to begin vesting from the date that I started working part-time as a contractor, not from the date on which I became a W-2 employee. This is definitely a unique structure, and it was fair because I had begun contributing to the company months in advance of my full-time start date. By the way, this is where I would love to share another pro tip, not just for negotiating compensation, but for how I try to approach my life. The truth is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And if I had not asked to receive my relocation bonus as a contractor, if I had not asked to structure my equity vesting schedule in the manner that I did, the answer would have been no. And so I'm someone who would rather ask and be either turned down or hear a not right now or this is not possible than never ask and always wonder, what if I had? Another pro tip, throughout this process, I talked to people. I talked to friends, I talked it through, and I also talked to other women who came from tech, consulting, finance backgrounds who were a few years ahead of me, some in engineering, some in product, some now entrepreneurs. And having those reference points and gut checks also made me feel more confident in what I was asking for. So this brings me to my next pro tip. If you're still in school and have the option to start part-timing or are working to support yourself like I did, setting up an LLC after you speak with a qualified tax professional, please ask your tax professional first before you do this, but setting up an LLC can give you flexibility, especially if you're also incurring professional or creative expenses on the side. Next, let's talk budget. The first thing I did when I got to SF was I made a budget. And this is another pro tip for women everywhere. Financial fear fades with financial facts. I'm going to say it again. Financial fear fades with financial facts. I'm also going to say it from a different angle. Financial fear fades with financial facts, ladies. Make that budget. You guys, the truth is, until you know exactly what is coming in and exactly what is going out, you're either living in denial or you're feeding your own anxiety spiral. And I know how scary it can be to confront your financial reality. But girlfriend, you can't build anything if you don't start with the truth. Facing your finances is the first step to financial freedom. So in terms of my financial snapshot, here's a bit of helpful context. I applied to the Wharton Business School when I was a senior at MIT. I knew fairly early on that I wanted to get an MBA, not just for the degree, but to round out my technical education from MIT. I also knew three things. First, tuition at an MBA program increases every year. And I've made a separate video about things I wish more people talked about before getting their MBA. Second, my opportunity cost, which is the salary I would be leaving on the table for the 2 years it takes to get an MBA, would also increase over time. And third, I wanted to make this investment while still fairly young because it would give me more time to reap the returns over the course of my post-MBA career. I now have a tight budget and an aggressive student debt paydown schedule. My motto at this stage of my life is 2 years to get the degree, 2 years to aggressively pay it off. And the framework I employed was simple. Delay, deploy, dividends. I'll say it again. Delay, deploy, dividends. Let's talk about delay. I delayed gratification by saving aggressively during the 2 years I worked before stepping into my MBA. That meant skipping certain lifestyle upgrades and staying focused on my midterm goal of completing my MBA while minimizing my debt. Second, deploy. When it came time to pay for business school, I was strategic in how I deployed my capital. I used my savings to cover all expenses during my first year of the program, and I took out government loans to support my second. I treated every dollar as if it had a job. And now I'm focused on earning dividends, not just in the financial sense, but in the control, independence, and deep sense of freedom I know I will have once I make that final debt repayment. So you guys, this is the framework I built my MBA investment around. And it's the same one that I continue to apply as I work towards financial freedom. So let's talk student loans. How much do I owe? I owe $125,000 in student loans. And here's a screenshot of my current balance. Note that I've started to pay some of it down. So one of the best pieces of advice I got was to refinance as early and as often as I could. My original loan had a 9+% interest rate. My servicer was a company called Nelnet. I actually received an email from Juno that offered a $500 bonus if I refinanced my loans through one of their loan partners. And that's exactly what I did. I actually refinanced my student loans through SoFi, and was able to reduce my rate to approximately 5.8%. Since I had a SoFi high yield savings account, this worked out perfectly for me. During this period, I also opened a SoFi high yield savings account, deposited the minimum required balance to earn the greatest cash back for opening, and received $300 in cash back for maintaining that balance for the required period of time. Let's have a quick sidebar on investing versus loan paydown. I know some people suggest investing while paying the loan down continuously on the side, and that can work for many, but I'm not one of those people. Here's how I think about it. First of all, as a woman, I value psychological safety, and to me, debt equals shackles. Second, I would rather feel free than owe anyone a single cent. You guys, financial freedom is my version of peace. Even if I get a higher return in the market, first of all, you've got taxes. Second, I would still rather just clear my debt first. And this is another pro tip, is at the end of the day, you need to do what feels right for yourself and what's going to give you the greatest sense of psychological safety. Let's talk emergency fund. An emergency fund is important to budget for in case you run into any expenses that you hadn't planned. It could be a health-related expense or something else that you need to cover the cost for, hence the name emergency fund. I highly recommend having 5 to 6 months of runway packed away in an emergency fund that you forget even exists in your day-to-day. Right now, I have $30,000 in my SoFi high yield savings account, which I'm treating as my emergency fund. I began working with my current employer while I was in business school and used that as an opportunity to build up this emergency fund before I was formally W-2'd. I'm also a big believer in practicing reasonable goal setting as a way to build trust in yourself. I actually have found this applies to all areas of life, not just finances. And I plan to make a separate video about that. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button on my channel. As a quick example though, my birthday is July 31st. Leo proud. And I set a goal for myself this year that come August 1st, I would hit that $30,000 emergency fund savings target for myself. In terms of my other assets, I also have 10,000 RSUs from a previous job at another high growth startup before I went off to business school. At this stage of my debt paydown, I do not have any other investments. So now let's get into the budget breakdown. Before I get into any of that, I'll also caveat that I never factor end of year bonuses or bonuses of any kind into my budgeting, simply because they're not a recurring stable source of income, and frankly, they're also not guaranteed. So without further ado, let's get into it. So as you can see here, typically what I like to do is I like to start with my monthly income and just taking stock of what I have in terms of my take-home salary after taxes and any other pre-tax deductions, as well as things like medical insurance, health insurance, FSA contributions, and anything else that I know is going to just get squared away before I see my actual take-home salary. The second thing I like to take stock of is my fixed expenses once I get that take-home salary. So I have a couple of categories here. These are just off the cuff and not set in stone. But the first thing I have is I have my rent. This is a fixed expense. I live in a 2-bed, 2-bath. And so there's my rent, that's my share. So I have my phone line, I have my phone insurance because I'm paying off my iPhone 16 Pro. And then I have subscriptions like Uber One, I have a Spotify premium subscription, I have the DoorDash Dash Pass, an Amazon Prime account, and I spend annually on the Instacart subscription, so I just prorate that across the month. And then you get into my variable expenses. So again, these really vary, hence variable, but a few categories broadly that I like to budget for are health and wellness, content creation, cloud storage, again, mostly supporting content creation, groceries, dining and delivery, transportation, travel and flights, personal care, shopping, although I don't do shopping. I shop once a year if I want to refresh my wardrobe, but especially because I'm laser focused on paying down my debt and building my content engine and entertainment. And so Whatever gets left over, as soon as my paycheck comes in, I immediately pay my loan down for the month with that paycheck. And as you can see here, this is my math for my estimated take home for my annual bonus. I actually don't index heavily on bonuses, as I mentioned in the video, but I do plan to allocate any bonus that I would receive towards my debt paydown as well. I hope this video helped pull back the curtain on what real financial planning can look like for a recent business school graduate paying down her student debt. Just remember that if you're navigating your student loans or negotiating your next offer, or just figuring out what financial freedom means for you personally, just know that you don't need to have a grand plan or have it all figured out to start making steps in the right direction for you and your financial freedom. At the end of the day, money is emotional, it's personal, but it doesn't have to be paralyzing. And so I encourage you to start small, get honest and transparent with yourself, and keep putting one foot in front of another. And if you feel like this video helped you, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and share it. Share it with a friend who you think it would help as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.